Hello and welcome to Dark Portents. I'm Christian and today I have a special guest, Philip Chase, who I will let introduce himself in 1 second. But before I do, if you enjoy this discussion of the path to Ascendancy up to book 2, feel free to throw us a comment, let us know what you think of the discussion, and subscribe to the channel. And without further ado, Philip, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and or your channel before we start digging into this book?
Okay, happy to, Christian. First, though, I'd like to thank you for inviting me onto your channel, Dark Portents. It's just a real pleasure to be here and to talk with you about Ian Esslemont's Path to Ascendancy. Specifically, well, we're going to talk, I guess, a general way about the trilogy, and then talk more specific spoilers later on for the first 2 books, Dancer's Lament and Deadhouse Landing. But yeah, thank you so much for being here and for having me here, I should say. And I guess just to describe my channel on BookTube, I do fantasy. I focus on fantasy, and I have been doing a lot of Malazan related content in the last few months, which is sort of my big current project. Is I have been doing a read along with AP Canavan, whose channel is A Critical Dragon, of the Malazan Book of the Fallen, and also Esslemont's novels of the Malazan Empire. So all this Malazan stuff is really up my alley right now. So I'm just really excited to be here to talk with you.
Yeah, I have been reading Malazan Book of the Fallen for the first time, going through the whole series. I'd tried a few times before that, and I'm doing it with the yeah, I hated it the first time. I'm doing it with the Legendary Green Team podcast, and
cool.
So at the time I wasn't doing YouTube, and then you put out the first Gardens of the Moon discussion with AP Canavan. Yeah. And I'd never heard of you. I'd never heard of AP Canavan. And I was like, these guys seem cool. What do they have to say? And then, you have these 2 like really smart guys who both seem like they're professors or something, which it turns out he's a doctor and you're a professor. So I wasn't too off the mark. And one of them has this amazing Irish accent. And from there, AP launches his own channel, and from his channel, my wife says, "Hey, we should do YouTube together." So here's Dark Portents, and it kind of actually starts on your channel in a way, even though the final spark there is AP's channel.
Yeah,
I wouldn't know what AP's channel was if it wasn't for your channel, right? So
yeah, well,
it goes back to your Gardens of the Moon video.
Yeah, no, that was a lot of fun. And I didn't know, I think when we started reading together, that he was going to start a channel, but he started shortly after we did Gardens of the Moon. And then we started doing our traditional thing where I do the non-spoiler talk on my channel and he does the spoiler talk on his. But he's an inspiring fellow. So I can see why you would feel like you and your wife starting up the channel, which I think is fantastic. I love that you're doing it along with her too. So it's really one of the great things about BookTube is really talking with other people about books. So I'm very happy that I've been so fortunate really to be doing this along with AP, because it has just added so many layers to my experience of the books. I mean, I was going to enjoy my reread of the Malazan Book of the Fallen anyway. And my first read of Esslemont's novels of the Malazan Empire, I was going to love it. I'm pretty sure no matter what. But doing it along with AP has been just really magical. So, but I'm happy to be here today with you, because I don't think that BookTube has done. There's not enough on BookTube yet about Esslemont's work. I really think that he has been underserved so far. He deserves a lot more attention on BookTube, in my opinion. He should be. Whenever we talk about the greatest living fantasy authors, Esslemont really should be in the discussion. And the greatest fantasy authors, period. I am absolutely, I read the 3 books in Path to Ascendancy last year, and I've been reading the novels of Malazan Empire. I'm 3 books in. this author deserves way more love on BookTube. So I'm really happy that you had the idea to invite me here and talk about Path to Ascendancy.
Well, yeah, I agree. When I read Knight of Knives, which is the only novel of the Malazan Empire I've read so far, I was just blown away by the thing. That book was phenomenal.
Yeah.
And your discussions with Esslemont on the channel were a great joy. And the reason why I invited you here actually is because I realized that in my reviews of Esslemont's work that I had a lot to say in the non-spoiler part, but that without somebody there to kind of bounce ideas off of and have them come up with stuff too, the spoiler sections were very lackluster. You know, when I was talking about Dancer's Lament and Knight of Knives, I was just like, and there's these couple things, and kind of, you know, when you don't have somebody to feed off of. So I'm starting to, it was AP's suggestion actually, that for every book in the Malazan world that I finish, I find an Ascendant like you and grab them and pull them into a discussion. So he used the word veteran in quotations, but I use the word Ascendant.
Honestly, I'm not sure I'm either one, an Ascendant or a veteran, to be honest. But I do agree with him though that having the discussion is what really, for me, this is what makes it so much fun and brings out stuff that I learn every time I talk with anybody. So good idea. He's full of good ideas.
I have all these ideas for individual videos now, and it's so much easier making collaborations that I have been not wanting to do them, and I haven't put out any videos lately because of it. And so this will be like the first one I've done in like weeks because, well, not true. I did one last night, but on another person's channel.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, okay. But Slowly Read, who you've had on your channel, actually.
Oh, I love Mark. He's one of my heroes. I hope he doesn't mind. I keep calling him my guru of grimdark. So
yeah.
Right.
I borrow his Dark and Dastardly from time to time. His like catchphrase, you know. Yeah. So I guess we should probably talk about the Paths to Ascendancy novels.
Yeah.
So first, we're going to start out with a spoiler-free discussion of the first two Paths to Ascendancy novel, and then when we kind of run out of gas on spoiler-free, we'll go into spoilers. So
sounds good.
So I guess, what are your general thoughts on the first two Paths to Ascendancy novels, or what do you think is worth discussing about them in the spoiler-free section?
Sure. Yeah. Let's just start by if there are any viewers out there potentially who are thinking about reading this. It's actually a trilogy, and I know that Esslemont is working on the Gestal, which is a sort of a sequel to these, I think, but it's not really part of this initial trilogy. I think it's a different storyline. So, but that's hopefully going to come out soon. I don't know exactly when. I haven't heard, but in the meantime, we do have these three wonderful books that are a prequel, as we said before, to the Malazan Book of the Fallen and Novels of the Malazan Empire. Those are the two series by respectively Erickson and Esslemont that are concurrent, more or less. I mean, they sort of overlap quite a bit. Although the two authors, two co-creators, basically take different parts of the Malazan world, different storylines, and independently tell those stories. But this trilogy, Path to Ascendancy, which begins with Dancer's Lament, tells the story of the founding of the Malazan Empire, and it introduces some really key characters in who some of which appear in the Malazan Book of the Fallen and in Novels of the Malazan Empire, most of which appear there. Some of them are legends by the time we get to the Malazan Book of the Fallen and Novels of the Malazan Empire. So, we get to see them on a more, I guess, human level, on a more human scale in Path to Ascendancy. And we get the backstory, we get the background, we get the making of the legend, if you will. So, I mean, if that doesn't sound like, if you're a Malazan fan and you haven't read these yet, and that doesn't sound interesting, then I don't know how else to sell it to you. But I mean, this is for me, I learned a lot about the characters that are in the Malazan Book of the Fallen and in Novels of the Malazan Empire by reading Path to Ascendancy. So it gave me a lot of insights that really increased my appreciation for these characters. And these are key characters. No spoilers here yet, but they're pretty huge characters. Also, it really helped me get a grip on the Malazan story, the not just the founding of the empire, but it helped me understand the place of the gods and the ascendants and all of that, and gave me some essential geography help, and so just how one culture relates to another. Because if you're familiar with the Malazan Empire, then you know that world basically after a lot of different cultures were sort of mushed together forcibly into the Malazan Empire. So here you get a little more of a taste, a little flavor of these various cultures on Quontali, which is the continent where the Malazan Empire is really, based. Yes, it started on the island of Malaz, but the real central power of the empire is on Quontali, and Malaz is just this backwater island off the coast of this continent. So yeah, you get to know the cultures and the place and the backstory and all of that. So that's one reason to read this trilogy. And another is these are just great stories. I mean, Esslemont tells if you haven't read anything by Esslemont yet, he tells some really great stories with a really kind of breakneck pace, with lots of action. And he's brilliant with characters. He's brilliant at incorporating themes. And he does just a fantastic job with atmosphere. I think he's one of my favorite writers right now in terms of his development of atmosphere. I mean, he really is. You read Night of Knives. I mean,
Night of Knives is probably the most atmospheric book I've ever read.
Yeah. Isn't it though? I mean, it's just so well done. And you do see that in here when you're introduced to various warrens, and Esslemont's a lot of fun. If you're curious about how magic works in the Malazan world, then he's a lot of fun to read, because he does some really interesting things with magic as well. So yeah, and the humor is another reason, that famous Malazan humor. Erikson and Esslemont are different writers, but I find that I think probably, I don't know if it's because of their friendship or if they just came that way or what, but they have a similar kind of humor that's a bit quirky. It's a lot of fun. And I have to say, there are moments in these books where I laugh. So it's really great stuff.
Well,
so those are some of the reasons. I mean, I'm sure you have some as well.
Sure. But first, I just want to speak to that humor thing. Erikson has said that his target audience when he writes these books is Esslemont, and Esslemont's target audience is him.
Yeah.
So if they've played D&D together on their archaeological digs and developed this deep friendship, you have to figure they know how to make the other guy laugh. So that, they might have a lot of different styles outside of the humor, but if they have a shared sense of humor and they're trying to specifically hit each other with the humor, that might be why they're kind of similar in their approach to humor.
Oh, that's very cool. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. That's really cool. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it works. I mean, look, I'm sure they're making each other laugh, and they're definitely making me laugh. So.
Right. Oh, and I'm sure there are many jokes in here that the audience doesn't have enough pieces in their puzzle box to even catch all the jokes and references,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But there's plenty for those who haven't read this yet, who are watching. There is plenty of stuff that you will have the puzzle pieces to put together. There's lots of great humor.
Yeah, go ahead.
So so without getting into spoilers, I will just say that Dancer's Lament for me was not as strong as Deadhouse Landing.
Okay.
I did really enjoy it, but it kind of felt way more focused on Dancer and Wu, who are two of the main characters, and I won't get into why because of spoilers. But it was very focused on them, and it didn't feel as much to me like the other characters were as, like it felt like these were the clear main characters, and then it was like when we're away from them, it kind of felt like, why are we away from them? Especially with Eco, I felt like it kind of seemed like way balanced on them. And then with Deadhouse Landing, I feel like it just opened up, and you don't feel like any of the characters are given at short shrift, and why they're all on the board, and it kind of and it felt like I don't know. I feel like I could develop that more in spoilers probably, but I do feel like this trilogy is improving as it goes. Now, I haven't read the third one, but for me, Dancer's Lament was great. It was fun. It was 4 stars. For me, there were a few little nitpicks, here and there of what things that bothered me, or things that I was like, oh, I hope the rest of the trilogy's, not gonna just keep doing this. And then I got to book 2, and I was just like, I'm sold. This is I'm seeing more of what I loved about Night of Knives in Deadhouse Landing, and
Interesting.
I don't know. What did you feel that it was pretty even, or do you think it improves as it goes?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the wonderful things about BookTube is we have a diversity of experiences and opinions, and I loved all 3 books. First of all, that's just I would emphasize that the most, but I almost had the opposite experience where I think of the 3, I like Dancer's Lament the most. And I like how Esslemont does a more concentrated story there. I mean, if you look at his later, or actually his earlier books, but chronologically they're later, the novels of Malazan Empire. You do have Night of Knives, which is a very concentrated story, which is in a way a little more common in an Esslemont book. The Erikson books tend to be bigger. Of course, he has, the novellas, the Bokelane and Corval Broach stuff and all that. So all these are really generalizations that you could easily disprove probably. But I say for the most part, you tend to get more concentrated stories with Esslemont. For example, in Dancer's Lament, you have 3 perspective characters, 3 POVs, right? You have Dancer, you have Eco, who you mentioned, and the other one is
Silk.
Sorry?
Silk.
Yes, of course, Silk, the mage. Yeah.
So there are actually more POVs than that, but
those are the 3 main ones.
Those are the 3 main ones. You get the Sister of Cold Nights in both of these, and I assume in the
yes,
as well.
Yeah, she makes an appearance. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And she's important. Obviously, she's a connection to the bigger series and everything else. But then what happens is, as you go, as you said, in the trilogy, Deadhouse Landing, that broadens. You get more POVs. And not only that, but the scope broadens. You go from basically, I mean, in Dancer's Lament, you're in Li Heng, not the whole time, but most of the time. It's about Li Heng, which is almost a character itself in there. But later in Deadhouse Landing, the scope broadens to more of Quon Tali. And then you'll see in Kellanved's Reach that it broadens even more. It goes beyond Quon Tali. So that's all I'm going to tell you for now. I don't want to spoil anything.
Right.
But
well, I have my predictions that we could do at the end once we've done spoilers. So.
Yeah, we can. Oh, that'll be fun. Yeah, for sure.
So of course, I kind of know. I mean, some of it would just be me predicting like what happens before the end of Kellanved's Reach, because I know some of what happens, right? So not going in blind.
Yeah, you'll make an educated guess, I guess,
right?
What we could say. So, but yeah, I liked the intimacy of Dancer's Lament. I really liked it a lot, and I enjoyed the relationship between Dancer and Wu tremendously. And Dancer's Lament was able to concentrate on that more, I think, because of the smaller number of POVs, that it felt like a more dominant part of that book. Whereas when you get to Deadhouse Landing, there are more different, and I enjoyed them as well. But for me, the relationship between, and this is something you see a lot in Malazan books, because as you mentioned, Esslemont and Erikson gamed all of this before they started with D&D, and then they moved on to the GURPS system, and a lot of these famous Malazan duos are a result of the 2 of them interacting while they were doing this gaming. And it really comes through beautifully in Dancer's Lament. It's still there in Deadhouse Landing, but it's not as central, I think. So
I wonder if Erickson was as frustrating for Esslemont to play with when they were playing Dancer and Wu as
actually, I think, now don't quote me on this, but I believe that Erickson was Dancer.
Really?
And yeah. I think it's Erickson who is Dancer, whereas Esslemont, or I'm not sure, one of the two of the characters, I think Esslemont did Wu, and that Dancer might have been actually a character that was not played by either one or something like. I'm not sure exactly. AP would be able to tell you like that. Yeah.
For some reason, I had it in my head that Wu was Erickson, and
about that, I'm reasonably certain that it's Esslemont who did. I'm sure they could have switched around easily, but I think it's Esslemont who played Wu. But don't quote me on that.
Question: was Wu as frustrating on the tabletop as he is in the? Because he.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure that Esslemont gave Erickson all kinds of trouble when they were playing, and that he would surprise him constantly. Of that, I'm pretty confident. So, yeah, but we'll have to ask AP next time we see him, or he can. If he watches this, I'm sure he'll leave a comment. So, AP, help us out here, okay? But I'm reasonably confident that it's Esslemont who was Wu, actually. So, yeah.
Well, and so part of it is when I asked Erickson about, DMing and writing stuff like this, one of his pieces of advice was, if your game has illusion magic, which Wu has a relationship with that, then just go to town on that, so I just assumed that he was the one playing the guy with the illusion magic, but I guess that's why you shouldn't assume.
They're tricky. Speaking of tricky, there's another thing I want to mention for your viewers, and that is the lack of correspondence between the various series in the Malazan world, which is a tricky thing. I'm sure you've noticed as well. If you're a person who has read the Malazan Book of the Fallen and you read the other series, not so much, I'm not speaking so much of Esslemont's novels of the Malazan Empire. I'm talking about the prequel series more. So Erickson's The Carcanis trilogy, which has 2 books out so far, and he's working on the 3rd as we speak, but also Path to Ascendancy. You will find that there are certain things that don't jive, that there's a certain history that is talked about in the Malazan Book of the Fallen, and when you or in novels of the Malazan Empire, and when you compare it to what actually happens in Path to Ascendancy, or in the much earlier, chronologically speaking, Carcanis trilogy, you'll find that there are discrepancies, there are contradictions. And this is something you have to live with if you're a Malazan fan. Just deal with it. Because they do this, I think, very deliberately. I mean,
yes, I was just about to say that is a deliberate critique of human knowledge and of the concept of history as something that you can nail down.
So, exactly. It's a slippery thing. And they're both coming at this as archaeologists. And I think they both love to dig the historians a little bit. There's a little bit of pun there, sorry. But they like to give little digs to the historians because, and they have a healthy, skepticism about the veracity of historical accounts that often do erase certain voices and perhaps pad the story a bit here and there, or change things around. And, so there is in the Malazan books in general, you'll find historians here and there, and they usually are fairly skeptical of their own trade. If you take history as literal truth, you're in trouble, So
right.
And the Malazan world is full of this kind of thing.
And this idea of, not to get too into the weeds about this critique of history in Malazan for the viewers, but just a little dip into the weeds. This idea of history as something where you can nail down this happened in this year, very modern concept. If you go back a lot of this stuff was like stories told by like poets and storytellers and,
Yep.
historians that would kind of, be like, yeah, 500 years ago, it's not important, like whatever. And I haven't read Carcanus, but I have it on good authority that the prologue to the thing has, or maybe it's an epigraph or something, has one poet saying to another, I don't remember all of the story. So what I don't remember, I'm just gonna make up. Or something along those lines, right? And
Yeah,
that's
that's
a good
right.
signal to the reader that's like, this isn't, you can't match all of this stuff up. I mean, I beat my head against this going from the second book of the Malazan Book of the Fall into the third, trying to be like, yeah, but this can't be this character, because
Yeah.
if it syncs up with Deadhouse Gates here and it doesn't, you have to ignore all that. Like even from Erickson book to Erickson book, the timelines will not match like one to the next. Not perfectly, at least.
Yeah. Yeah, no, he'll play around a bit with that, and that will. I'm not going to say a ton about that, but that sort of makes more sense when you get to the end. So you'll
Fair enough.
see. But it's really cool what they do, actually. When you get to the end of everything and you realize what they've been up to, it's really pretty cool. And Path to Ascendancy is really part of all of that. So that's just something I wanted to warn your viewers about, is that if you start reading, you're like, wait, but I thought so-and-so was alive then. And then, wait, I thought this person was related to this other. Yeah, just go with the flow. So
Yeah. Continuity, not necessarily.
right, right.
So is there anything else we should bring up before we go into spoilers?
Yeah, no, I think just if you're a viewer out there who has not read these yet, I urge you to give Esslemont's writing a try. And I've even there are some really cool people out there who disagree with me on this, like Iskar Jarek, for example. Bless him. But I've even said in the past that I think Path to Ascendancy could be an entry point into the Malazan world for somebody who hasn't read anything yet, because particularly if you're somebody who doesn't enjoy being confused in the beginning, because it's sort of a famous thing about Gardens of the Moon, the first book of the Malazan Book of the Fallen by Erickson, that it doesn't hold your hand and you just sort of, you're thrown into there in medias res, and it's just kind of, whoa, everything is all over the place and you're like, where am I and what is going on? And which is fun. I enjoy that, actually. I enjoy sort of having to pick myself up and start running immediately. But if you're not somebody who appreciates that, and you want a gentler introduction to the Malazan world, I think you could give the Path to Ascendancy a try. And like I said, not every Malazan fan is going to be happy about me saying that, because you do miss the Easter eggs that are in Path to Ascendancy if you do it that way. There are some really fun Easter eggs in here, and I'm seeing them now that I'm reading novels of the Malazan Empire. I'm catching more and more of them in retrospect. But I always feel like it works both ways. If you read the Path to Ascendancy first, you're gonna have reverse Easter eggs when you read novels
Right.
of the Malazan Empire and the Malazan Book of the Fallen. So yeah, I think it works both ways.
Right. And I was actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was planning on asking you if you still held to your controversial take, because I went back and listened to your earlier reviews this morning to prepare for this.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
So I'm glad that you and I didn't like your comment because I was busy, but I did enjoy them. But I was going to ask you if you still held to that viewpoint.
I do. And you know what? I asked Esslemont about it even. So I have no less an authority than Ian C. Esslemont, sort of backing me up here. I think he sort of agreed that it could work just fine. And by the way, AP agrees with me too. So, I'm in good company.
Well, look, I think, I'm glad I started with Gardens of the Moon this time around,
Yeah.
but 6 or 7 years ago when I tried the series and hated it, coming off of only having read like Wheel of Time and other handholdy fantasy, this would have been a better entry point for me at that time. I'm glad it didn't play out that way. Glad I came back to it. I love it now. But if you were going to try to get me into it at the time, this would have been, I mean, these books may not have even been written then, but I don't remember when they were published, but nonetheless, this would have been a better entry point and so same with Knight of Knives even.
Yeah. Yeah.
But and then the other thing is that one of the things that a little bit bothered me about Dancer's Lament, and I can develop this more in the spoiler section, but it's that because I know it's a prequel and I know where a lot of it's going, the stakes for certain characters kind of felt like, and it was way less in the second book, even though those same characters, and I won't say who because of spoilers, but the same characters are in the second book. It was just the way he handled it was different and it worked. But for me, but in the first book, there were some scenes where I knew, like, I know they're gonna find a way out of this situation because I know where they end up. So that would not be there if this was your entry point. You would have no idea that these characters are so central to the future. You would have no idea where they end up.
Yeah.
And so the stakes would be raised, but you can definitely tell that, like, when you're reading these books, I guess this is kind of the last thing I'll say before we go into spoilers. You can definitely tell that there are Easter eggs, and like there are some where you just read an Easter egg and you don't know what it is, because I haven't read all of the novels of the Malazan Empire yet. And one thing that viewers should know about Malazan is that characters change their name often. And there was a moment in one of these books where a character was like needing a new name, and they were like, I will be such and such, and you almost hear the dun dun dun, and I'm like, who? Like, so I know I'm supposed to know because of the like pacing of it, but I don't. So
and some of those moments are absolutely just a riot. There is some humor worked into those scenes as well, which no, I can't give it away, but you'll know it when you see it. So
let us move into spoilers. If you don't want spoilers for the first two books of Paths to Ascendancy, turn this video off, go read Paths to Ascendancy, come back, it will be here. Bye, thank you for watching. And so so one thing, what I kept hinting at is with Dancer and Wu, as you probably figured out. It felt like, I know they're gonna get through this, and so I know they're not gonna die here, I know they're not gonna lose here. And actually he did play with that a little bit, like they would lose and there would be consequences that weren't utter defeat. But they were like it was like when you're playing an RPG and it's like some RPGs have like, you can succeed or you can succeed but. So he did a lot of succeed but or fail ands to still have that suspense and still have stakes, but it kind of felt like, because he had to do that so much, that they were like failing upwards through a lot of it. And the thing that made that kind of okay for me in the end and made me like be fine with it is that they didn't actually defeat Shamanat. They did not fail upwards to conquer Li Hang, because I think that would have just like stretched it beyond anything that I could handle. And the fact that they failed at the end of at least of that first book, obviously we know they're going to conquer the entire Quantalian continent, right? But the fact that they didn't just fail into their first conquest made me like, okay, Esslemont, I got this. And so in the second book, I feel like they were more like, they were still messing up, they were still making mistakes, and there were still consequences. I know they're still going to conquer the continent, so that's not gone, but the way he handled it felt less like comical. It felt like it was a joke running through Dancer's Lament so many times that it kind of got worn a little bit. And the saving grace for me was that they didn't beat Shamanat that way. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. It makes a lot of sense. In a way, what we have is not exactly a Bildungsroman here, but you have the development of these characters who are young and yet certainly Wu, who I think we're in spoilers now, right, for the first two books, so we can
Right.
say how he got his super secret. His name became Kellenved in one of the funniest scenes ever.
I love that scene. I was
Yes.
cracking up.
You have something about having Kel and Ved in his name to have make a cool name, and what was it? Dancer said, "Well, you could have Kel and Ved," and he said, "That's it. That's my name. What do you mean,
And Dancer's
Kel
like,
and
what?
Ved?" So that's good stuff. But yeah, so what you see is them as younger, ambitious people who have some failure. They fail in Li Hang. They have to leave licking their wounds, so to speak.
Yes.
And Shalmanet is just too much for them, and her mage core, including Silk and the others, and Ho and all those, Mara and Smokey and the gang. So they lose there, but the fact that they did accomplish some kind of cool things, like, for example, Dancer, I think, is the one who assassinates the king of Itko Khan, right? There's that
Yes.
moment. So they have some little coups, and they begin to establish the networks that will make them what they are. You know, you can even see the beginnings of the Talons, which is the Dancer's assassin core. You know, you can see
The children, you mean? Those were the
yeah,
children in Li Hang,
that's
including
right.
Bowden.
Bowden is now. I think that Bowden might be the father of the one you meet later, but don't quote me on that. That was just pure conjecture, because there is talk in Deadhouse Gates of Bowden Senior somewhere or other. So, and if you look at the timing, I think that might be a father, but I'm not sure. It could be the same dude. I'm not sure.
Actually. So this is interesting because the other day, Huron Fan, who's my co-panelist on the Malazan Green team.
Cool. Yeah, I'm familiar with Huron Fan from.
But I had assumed that the Bowden in Li Hang is Bowden's father or grandfather because of the comments in Deadhouse Gates about Bowden Senior.
Yeah.
So, Huron speculates that he may be unnaturally long-lived, and Bowden Senior may be a fabrication. And they're the same person. I have no idea if that's true or not. I've been assuming father or grandfather. I even think there's a line in Dancer's Lament. I could be wrong, but I think there's one where they say that it's a name that passes down. But
interesting.
Yeah.
So it could be either way, really, because of the dental, healing that gives lots of people longevity. Lots of these characters are very long-lived when you think about it. If again, it's that tricky Erickson Esslemont, they might be just, who cares about chronology and all that. But if you're really a stickler and you're trying to figure it out, these people would have to be incredibly long-lived. And you just say dental, and you're good to go. So it could work either way. But back to what we were talking about, this the idea of them, learning the ropes, getting a handle on their abilities, making their networks, all that stuff is going on during these two books, and you're getting to see these characters grow. And that's the key thing here is the growth of these two very ambitious people. But as you said, and I agree, I think that's a good insight, it gets somehow less playful and more serious in Deadhouse Landing. And I would say it happens again in Kellenven's Reach. And here's the interesting thing. What do you have to do to have an empire? You have to break a lot of people. You have to do some seriously morally, not even ambiguous, but you have to to have that kind of ambition. As much as I love these characters, as much as I enjoy their relationship, you have to do some really messed up things to have an empire, to conquer other people. A lot of people die. A lot of people get stepped on. A lot of lives get ruined in the process. So that note of seriousness is something that very much comes into play and is related to the whole idea of empire being a thing that crushes people. And yes, okay, so and it's like that in the real world. You look at the history of humanity and you look at empires, and there are historians who will argue that empires are it's the old argument, but and there is some truth to it. They are bestowers of civilization. They bring about, I mean, look, when the Romans conquered certain peoples, they brought certain benefits to them. I mean, that's probably true. But empires are also evil, and they involve the oppression of millions and millions of people, and the exploitation ongoing of more people. And so what is happening here is the story of a founding of an empire. Let's not forget that. And the fact that they're fun and quirky, and yeah, probably Kellanved is a bit nuts as well. But this ambition, it's a kind of, anytime you see, ambition of this sort, it's a Faustian thing. There's going to be something really messed up about it, because when you become willing to destroy lives in order to realize your ambition, you do some messed up things. So, as much as I love the characters, I'm not going to just simply say, wow, Dancer and Wu, lots of fun, let's just, tra la la. It's kind of disturbing what happens. And they're also working in partnership with characters you meet in Deadhouse Landing with Surith and all these others. They come into play. And so there's a whole side of this too, which is about her ambition. And that's an important theme introduced early on as well. So, I think there's that seriousness is something that you put your finger on nicely.
So I'm gonna just disclaimer here for the next maybe 20 seconds. Spoilers for the prologue of Gardens of the Moon. This book made me very sympathetic with Surly usurping the imperial throne.
Oh yeah.
Right. You see from the very beginning of their relationship, it's not even something that develops later on.
Yep.
That Kellanved is like aloof. He's removed from their concerns. He makes them promises, which he does deliver on, but he has to be like prodded to deliver on them by Dancer. He doesn't like prioritize them. He doesn't keep people in the loop about how he's going to deliver on these promises. He has his plan, and he knows whether and how. Maybe he has an idea of when. That's a lot later than everybody else wants, that he's going to deliver on these promises to get people to do what he wants. And he doesn't share it with anyone, and just goes off, into magical worlds, into other continents, and does his own thing. And Surly's left, just kind of picking up the pieces. And this is established like from the very beginning of the relationship.
Absolutely.
She's not shown in a sympathetic light in the prologue of Gardens of the Moon.
Correct.
But as the Malazan Book of the Fallen sort of develops, you get the impression that this is how Kellanved ruled, which is that he didn't. He just kind of went on adventures, and that is like from the get-go. It's not like he was super serious, conquered the imperial throne, and then got bored and decided to be an adventurer. He starts out as this aloof, keeps to himself adventurer who wants other people to do what he wants,
He's so true.
He's a much less likable character. I mean, there are funny moments in the second book, but in the first book, he's way more likable. In this second book, he is, I share Surly's frustration and other characters, not just Surly, but since I know where she's going in the prologue of Gardens of the Moon, I particularly picked up on her and their relationship and how sort of messed up it is from the beginning.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. To understand Surly / Lessene, you have to read Esslemont's books. You really do. And Erickson gives us glimpses of that too in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. But I think really to get her, you need to read Path to Ascendancy and novels of the Malazan Empire, particularly the first two books, Knight of Knives and Return of the Crimson Guard. If you want to understand her, those are the books you have to read, because you're right. I mean, she's the backbone of the empire. She's the organizer. She gets things done while Kellanved is off on his escapades, his Faustian escapades, because he's after power. He's after knowledge. He doesn't really want to be bothered with the workings of an empire. the stuff that you have to do in order to keep it going. He's kind of a nutcase. So and he also, by the way, of course, who else gets frustrated with him is Dancer. Dancer is constantly having to watch his back, and he probably would have, never made it if it weren't for Dancer. So the genius of Kellenved is something that never would have gone far without Dancer. I think he understood the need to surround himself with more practical people. He has Dancer as basically his right-hand man, watching his back. He's got Surly doing basically the work of running the empire. He's also we haven't mentioned Dassam yet. He was a pretty interesting character in here too, right? And he is an important part of the founding of the empire too. He's the one who has the loyalty of the soldiers in the beginning, and he's the one who really organizes the military aspect of it. So he's a brilliant delegator. Our good friend Kellenved, which is good. What good leaders do, they do delegate, but he's also this crazy Faustian character who's off on his own quests for knowledge and power, and that doesn't really make him a very reliable person.
Well, and on the flip side of what you just said, Surly is established pretty early on as not necessarily being the best delegator. She does delegate some tasks, but in Deadhouse Landing, I mean, there's more that could be said on this if we were discussing the Book of the Fallen, particularly Gardens of the Moon. But just in the context of Deadhouse Landing, she's like, I can fight, and like doesn't see that she serves the group better to let other people kind of handle things for her. So she's kind of on another extreme, maybe not as extreme in the other direction as Kellenved is, but because she does delegate some tasks. At the end of the book, at the end of the second book, you see her send the character Lee to, who I forget what's the name that she takes at the end of the book.
At the end of Deadhouse Landing?
Yes. There's this.
I'm having a brain fart here, so
I can't remember it either. That's the moment I was talking about, by the way, because Surly's like, "Oh, you're gonna need a new name because people already know you as Lee," and Lee's like, "My name will be such and such," and it's like, I know that's important, but I don't know why.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it, but anyway, yes, for sure.
So she does send her to Nap. That's the name of the country, right?
Right.
To deal with their contacts there, right? So she's not incapable of delegating the way that Kellenved's incapable of not going off on his escapades unless he's dragged by the ear to not do it. But she is not necessarily the best delegator, right?
That's right. Yeah, and that has consequences. You're onto something kind of important, and I won't say too much about it, but the fact that she does try to take on, she's one of those personalities that you try to do everything yourself and nobody else is really good enough to do it. And so that has consequences down the road for her, for sure.
And without spoiling anything for Gardens of the Moon, just a little teaser. Sometimes when she does delegate, she doesn't necessarily pick the right tool for the right job.
Yes. Yeah, that went a little bit wrong there, didn't it? Yeah. Speaking of that, there's another great character we meet in Deadhouse Landing. That's Taishrin, right?
Yes. And I was excited to get more of Taishrin because this is probably the most sympathetic portrayal of Taishrin I've seen so far. He was a fairly sympathetic character in Knight of Knives, but still, you didn't get into his head. You didn't necessarily see, what his intentions were. And it was kind of, there was doubt cast on whether or not, is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy or not? I mean, for anybody who's read more than one of these books, you probably know there are no good guys and bad guys, right? But, there are different lights that this character gets cast in by different authors in different books. And in this, he's shown very sympathetically. He's persecuted by the cult of Drek. He's completely innocent. The god even intervenes against his execution and tries to send him back with a message that nobody ends up hearing. Which wondering if there will be consequences for that for either the god or the cult, because the god sends him back to
Yeah.
message, and there's no delivery.
Oh,
So,
there are some big consequences, but I won't get into that.
well, that's good, because leaving that to come to nothing would have been a
Yeah.
a faux pas, I guess.
Yeah. But I really do love what, like you, we get of Tayshrin in Path to Ascendancy. And he's a character that you're absolutely right. You come to sympathize with a lot more. I don't think I've ever said this in a video. I don't know if, I'm sure someone has, but I feel that Tayshrin, and I don't know if Esslemont had this in mind or not, but I feel like Tayshrin is on the spectrum. And that he is somebody who is highly intelligent, obviously the greatest mage possibly of his age. But he is somebody also who has this tendency not to get the social cues all around him and not to care very much about, and you see that really in Deadhouse Landing. It has consequences for him. He is almost innocent in the way that he is exploited or manipulated into the position that he gets in Deadhouse Landing, where he's attacked essentially, and everybody kind of knows what's going on but him, and because he is really lost in his studies. He is pushing the boundaries in the Warrens and doing things that nobody else can do, and so yes, he's very powerful and very smart, but he also has these when it comes to other people and their motives and what's coming from them, he seems to be sort of unaware. So he's not.
And also, just social power.
Yeah.
From that, like political power.
Yes.
He sees power so narrowly as being arcane power, like root arcane power almost, and then misses that there's this whole social superstructure that people.
And you could even say maybe that's why he does what he does in Gardens of the Moon. Possibly he misses what the message is, maybe taking something too literally. Or more literally than Lacine might have meant. So, but yeah, I really like what we get here in Deadhouse Landing in terms of the view we have of Tayshrin. And that is something these two authors are both marvelous at, Erickson and Esslemont, is giving you different sides of a character, sometimes within the same book, but sometimes in separate books and different stories. And it's really something. It makes you pause and think about people you actually know in real life, and perhaps be a little less hasty to judge. So I love that.
There's couple things here. One is that we get almost the opposite lesson with Tattersail.
Yes.
He's only focused on the social power and doesn't really see the way she's being used and manipulated for that desire. She's so focused on that and not on learning to be a good battle mage, not on learning the secrets of the arcane. She's like, well, when I learn those things, I want to be the queen, And then at the end, she kind of realizes that putting those desires first and foremost allowed her to be, horribly manipulated
by Mock. Yes. Yeah.
Who, funny enough, is deposed as soon as she's out of the picture.
Yeah. Oh yeah, because she was
how reliant on that manipulative relationship he really was.
Yeah, it was a parasitical relationship, it's not the most flattering view of Tattersail, that's for sure. She's younger and she doesn't listen to the wise people around her, like Agala, for example, who is trying to be her mentor figure, and so her ambitions. There's a lot in here about ambition. Actually, it's an interesting theme that Esslemont does really well with. So yeah, it's really cool. Yeah.
And then the other thing is what I wanted to see more of, and what I was surprised we didn't see more of, but not disappointed because I'm sure it's here somewhere, is Hairlock.
Because
yes, we get introduced to him in the mines, the Auditero mines, and then he escapes, and I assumed he would come back to Malaz Isle, and it ends up being Tayshrin who joins them on Malaz Isle, and I thought that we'd get a lot more Hairlock, because we get a very different view of Hairlock. Like, we don't get to meet him as himself really in Gardens of the Moon. We meet him as something else. And
he's not yeah, spoilers for Gardens of the Moon. I'm sure they've all read it anyway. I mean, he's not a puppet, so
right.
yeah, so
He's
but
a big dude. I didn't realize how big this dude was. He's a big.
yeah. I mean, when you meet him in Gardens of the Moon, there's only half of him, and then he's a puppet. But yeah, no, I mean, he's not. The Hairlock you meet is not the most sympathetic character either. He's kind of a jerk already. But you will. I won't say too much about it, but you will definitely see more of him in Caliban's Reach.
Oh, great!
Yeah, you will for sure. You will not be disappointed.
Great. I really wanted to see to get more of that and see how all these characters relate to each other.
Yeah.
And speaking of, I love the way that Erikson and Esslemont don't only stick to stereotypical, you expect the rogue to be the small sneaky type. You expect the mage to be this like, bookish fellow with with his nose stuck in a book. And
right.
They do give you those archetypes sometimes, like with Tashrin's probably the prototypical mage, right? And Tattersail probably also. But then Hairlock's this big burly dude, so you don't only get the one size fits all like cookie cutter.
Oh my goodness, no, yeah.
And
you have other characters. You have characters like Urko, Urko Crust, who, he might seem like a big, burly, but he's very clever too. He's very, very clever. So, they are two of the authors who are least likely to stick to the stereotypes. So you can be safe, assuming you're going to be surprised when you're reading.
Right.
Yeah.
But they don't erase the archetypes either. They give you the archetypes. Maybe they'll play with them a little, but then they'll be like, here's a complete different thing that you won't expect at all. So they have a balance. It's not just like constant trying to subvert, but it's also not just sticking to the playbook. It's a nice balance of the two.
I agree. Yeah, if you're going to subvert tropes, you're going to have to deal with them on some level. So yeah.
I love the tease at the end with Urko and Kellanved about the first throne.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that goes somewhere in Kellanved's Reach. Yeah, I can't say much about it. But you will get. Oh my goodness. So not only is it the story of the founding of the empire, but you'll see how in Kellanved's Reach, how certain elements that were behind the success of the empire came into play. So I won't say more than that, but you'll know it when you see it.
Right.
So, but it's really cool. And it's fun for that. It's really fun because we were talking about the scale and the scope before, and the scope gets bigger in the third book, even bigger than it was in Deadhouse Landing. And the number of characters grows as well. So you get a lot of interesting cameo type things going on in there as well. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
So one thing I'm hoping for in Kellanved's Reach is Dasim Ultor is shown in these first two books as being a very powerful warrior who grasps tactics very well. But he's also supposedly the architect of the sort of like Roman-esque military organization of the Malazan Empire. And you don't learn that from swinging swords at people guarding temples. I don't care how.
Right.
So I would hope that we see how that becomes earned. How Dasim goes from being a powerful warrior, who's just a very good swordsman and may understand tactics, to somebody who can understand like grand strategy and organization on the level that it takes to be sort of the brain of the Malazan military style.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if that will be earned in Kellanved's Reach, because so far we have not really seen that. or why it is that way.
Yeah, it has a lot to do with, I think, his relationship with Hood and the
Mm.
fact of what he was supposed to be for Hood. And it is something that his story is interesting because you get some nice glimpses of it here. But it is something I'm learning that I saw more of as well in novels of the Malazan Empire, interestingly. So I don't want to say too much about it because I don't want to spoil it for you, but he's a fascinating character. Absolutely, Dassam is kind of one of my favorites actually in here, even though I, like you, would love to know more. But you do get those kind of flashback things in there. I forget if it's in Dancer's Lament or if it's in Deadhouse Landing. But you get some flashback elements in there where we learn that when he was a boy, he was somehow, and help me out here if you remember what I'm talking about.
So
But
the only thing that we got for flashbacks from him is he goes, he's hunted by like a tiger outside of his village, and he falls
right,
into this cave.
exactly,
Everybody believes him dead.
right,
And during that time, he's learning to fight this warrior, whoever that may be, whether it's the previous mortal sword of Hood, whether it's Hood himself, whether
right,
it's something else. I don't know.
right.
You probably know, but
No, I know as much as you do there. But I'm assuming that period, that formative period, is where he got not just his fighting abilities, but any military knowledge that he might have. That's my assumption. But that's what forms him. And is he at that point human anymore? I think that's a legitimate question you can ask just from, it's in Dancer's Lament, I think, right? Where
it's in Deadhouse Landing, actually.
Oh, okay, it's in okay.
But there's not really an indication there that he would learn anything besides how to fight with a sword.
Yeah, true.
And it is hinted that he may not be human anymore.
Right.
Certainly his villagers believe him to be a ghost, but that may be tradition. But not being human, being a good sword fighter, those don't necessarily mean I'm capable of designing, an entire MO of an army, and
right.
the most successful army ever, maybe not counting the Talani Mas. So that's that's something I want to see somewhere earned, whether it's in not in novels of the Malazan Empire or in Kelamet's Reach. But somewhere I want to see how he goes from one to the other, whether it's in flashbacks or something.
Yeah, so the best I can come up with for now is that I think his military genius is a product of him being something more than human at this point as a result of that's the best I can do for now. There may be somebody out there who would give a better answer though, but that's all I got.
If you have a spoiler-free answer to this, down in the comments. I haven't read past House of Chains or Knight of Knives, so anything past that, don't comment. But yeah, is there anything else you think we should talk about for spoilers before we wrap this thing up?
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much. I mean, you've got a fantastic cast of characters in both of these books, and I'm sure we're leaving out.
Calor.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, wow.
In Deadhouse Landing, and you get a little more of a taste of just how much he hates the Sister of Cold Nights.
Oh yeah.
Oh my goodness, is he driven? And I'm not sure I like him anymore, but maybe I'm more in awe of him as a result of this book. But.
Right. Yeah, he's certainly and you get to see him be a little more ruthless than you get a chance to see in at least the first few Malazan books, because he just I mean, I guess he does try at first to just buy his way to his destination, but when that doesn't work out, he just enslaves the sailors and makes them resort to cannibalism and threatens to destroy an entire city.
Yeah.
And then it's like and I didn't it's interesting, I didn't realize that Ototero would do that to the Sister of Cold Nights, because her being an elder It doesn't
Right.
work on the Talani Mass. It
Doesn't
doesn't.
work on the Elder Warrens either.
Right. So I don't know if that's a fracture in the canon because they have these different, viewpoints that don't necessarily match up, or if that's or if it's something specifically about a sword, like physically puncturing an elder god without a terrell, and as
Yeah.
opposed to just like trying to cancel their magic.
Yeah, I'm sure just getting punctured by a sword, period, wouldn't be much fun for anyone.
Right. But I
It-
mean specifically with the outer terrell, he made a big deal about it. So
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm not sure because you're right. It's not supposed to affect Elder Warrens anyway. So I don't know. I mean, well, I won't say too much about it because I don't want to mess up anything there. But that if you've read up to what you've read in the Malazan Book of the Fallen, you know that he's not got what he wants out of that exchange there.
right.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's cool. And another thing I love, in addition to just all the characters here, is you've got your typical Malazan convergence happening in both of these books, in Dancer's Lament and in Path to Ascendancy, where you have these various threads that kind of gradually coming, and that the ending is Esslemont makes some fantastic endings that are just breakneck pace because all this stuff is just boom coming together at the end. All of the plot threads just beautifully come together and explode. Isn't that great?
I love the way that that Esslemont handles convergence.
Yeah.
The best part of Dancer's Lament for me, I mean, there were a lot of great parts of Dancer's Lament, but one of the best parts, at least, was the convergence of the Jaghut sorcery to break the siege, which was just this really clever way to try to break the siege, using the Jaghut sorcery to freeze over the rivers so that the armies could cross, converging with the Leosin ritual and the devastation of the Leosin ritual, and showing that there were social consequences for the Leosin ritual, like the way that Shamanat is viewed by her people after that is like irrevocably changed, because it becomes a relationship of fear and not only a relationship of trust and respect.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And it's so cool because when you think back, Esslemont started Dancer's Lament in that Jaghut tomb, in that really comical scene where we first meet Dancer and Wu. And there's the just hysterical dialogue between them and the Jaghut.
Which was Gothos.
Yeah. I mean, it's just so great. And there's some great foreshadowing, of course. It wouldn't be a Malazan book without some awesome foreshadowing. So, yeah. And the same thing happens in Deadhouse Landing. The convergence is even bigger in Deadhouse Landing because you have even more. You have almost on two different planes. You have what's happening in on the physical plane with everybody in Malaz and Mox Hold and all this stuff going on and the fight there. And you've got a certain young fellow named Jack who participates in burning a bridge. So there's some nice little cameos there, but you've got the magical plane happening at the same time, right? With the stuff that's going on with Kellenved and the Deadhouse and all of that. So I mean, that's just all that stuff is kind of, and of course, then there's Tayshren's element and the attack on him that's happening, and all this stuff is boom exploding at once. So really fun stuff.
Well, and you get a deeper penetration into the Azath house, the secrets of the Azath houses, than you get in at least the first 4 books of the Malazan Book of the Fallen.
Yes.
There's, first of all, the word Azathani does not appear anywhere in those first 4, at least as far as I've gotten in House of Chains. Those first 4 books of the Book of the Fallen. That's a new word for me in the Dancer's Lament prologue. And then in Deadhouse Landing, you get even more, because the Sister of Cold Nights thinks of the Azathani as her brethren, which implies that maybe the elder gods were or became the Azathani, and Nightchill and Cruel and their other brother, I don't know if he's named in Dancer's Lament, but they certainly all appear in the same scene in Dancer's Lament.
Yeah.
So that's not a spoiler. They maybe the reason they're the only elder gods left is because the rest of them became the Azathani and retreated into the Azath houses. But I don't know if that's true, but her thinking of them as brethren kind of hints at this relationship between elder gods and the Azathani that is at no point in the first 4 books of the Malazan Books of the Fallen hinted at or said or any. You don't even hear the word Azathani, you just hear Azath house. So
yeah. So I won't answer. I guess there was a question in there somewhere. I'm not going to answer it, but I will just say,
or more like maybe a speculation.
Speculation, yeah. I will just say that to get a fuller picture of all this, you're going to need to read the Carcanus trilogy.
I see.
That stuff,
which I have to wait till after the Crippled God to read that one. So
yeah. I mean, it's good stuff. A lot about one of the cool things about reading Esslemont's books, both Path to Ascendancy and novels of Malazan Empires, I've learned a lot more about how the magic works in the world. So it's really cool. I'm enjoying that a lot. But a lot of the deeper kind of origin stuff you will find in Carcanus. And it's really interesting. And I think that's something that's going to be true of Walk in Shadow as well, the 3rd book. So I won't say more than that, except that you a lot of this stuff that you're speculating about, the closest thing you get to an answer, and even then, I'm not sure if you have all your answers, but the closest thing is going to be in Carcanus, I think.
Right. Well, I think we've been talking for about or over an hour. I don't know because we didn't start on time, but
yeah,
I feel like that means we should probably wrap it up, even though it's been really interesting and
probably a good idea. Yeah.
For those of you that are still with us, if you aren't already subscribed to Philip Chase's channel somehow, but are to mine, go to Philip Chase's channel, subscribe to it, links in the description. It's been a pleasure having you, Philip, and I will see everybody in the next video. Dark Portent signing off.